Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Let's go ahead and try to get this thing underway. My name is Bob Wilson. I'm the chairman of the York County Republican Committee. Welcome to the Republican debate for the 92nd State House District. Before we get started, I'd like to call on Northern York County Republican Club President Chuck Richards to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
You all rise, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. You may be seated. As we all know, we're here this evening to listen to five individuals provide their goods and wares and what they like to do in terms of making change happen in Harrisburg for all of you, the constituents here in the 92nd State House District. You know, here again, this is your opportunity to do your due diligence, for you to get to listen to the candidates and where they stand on the issues. And you know, here again, we are all Republicans, and although while we all may sound alike, there are slight differences between candidate A and candidate B, C, D, and E. And it's up to all of you to decide which candidate would best suit you in Harrisburg. Good luck to all of you. I hope that you take this time and use it to your advantage, so that way you can be an informed voter come April 24th. As you all know, when you came in here this evening, you probably had seen some voter registration forms seated at your chairs. Although while the voter registration deadline has closed for the April primary, we need to look towards the bigger picture in November. Although while in York County we have a huge lead in voter registration as opposed to our counterparts on the other side of the political spectrum, the Democrats, statewide, we are behind by 1.1 million registered voters. And if we as Republicans want to enact any type of change on a statewide basis or on the national level, we all must do our fair share in registering Republicans from now until November. So I ask all of you to take a voter registration card home with you, give it to your family, your friends, your loved ones, those disenfranchised Democrats and independents alike. Ask them to join the battle and the fight for our side. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce to you District Attorney Tom Kearney, who is going to be our official timekeeper here this evening. If we can't trust District Attorney, I don't know who we can trust, to be quite honest. So keep everyone in the know here, Tom. I greatly appreciate that. Also like to recognize Magisterial District Judge Thomas. He's seated right over here as well. Thank you for coming out here this evening, sir. Greatly appreciate that. Let's go ahead and get things started here. Let me go ahead and introduce you to our moderator here this evening. Matt Bladinger joined News 8 team in January 2008 as part of the 8 on Your Side investigative team. He focuses on delivering well-rounded political coverage and in-depth reporting on governmental issues. Early in Matt's career in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, he worked as a reporter and a weekend anchor at KELO TV. While there, he contributed to several newscasts honored by the Associated Press and also earned a regional Emmy Award for his role in a live coverage of a special event. Matt's originally from the Susquehanna Valley. He graduated from Central York High School and attended Elon University in North Carolina, where he earned a bachelor's degree in broadcast communications and with a minor in political science. Matt also studied the development of mass media for a month in Germany. Matt's a member of the Society of Professional Journalists, the Pennsylvania Legislative Correspondents Association, and the Radio Television News Directors Association. He enjoys volunteering time with Junior Achievement and supporting the Children's Miracle Network. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Matt Bladinger. Hey, you're very welcome. Thanks for coming out.
Yeah.
That's good.
All right, here we go. I don't want to waste any time. Let's introduce everybody one at a time in the order in which they drew slips of paper to determine in the order in which you're going to be answering questions. And so I guess number one, Scott Durr, would you like to take your seat, please? Number two, William Sigg. Number three, Mike Regan. Candidate number four, Anthony Pugliese. And number five, Dan Johnson. Each candidate is going to be allowed 3 minutes for an opening statement. We'll follow that same order. And then after opening statements, the questions will begin. The candidates will be asked a question and then allowed 4 minutes to answer. And then we'll open it up. If there's anyone who has a comment or a rebuttal of some sort to the answer, that individual will have 2 minutes then to respond, anyone who would like. And then when questioning is complete, we're going to give everybody 3 minutes again to offer a closing statement. So let's begin. Mr. Durr, opening statement.
Thank you. I'd just like to introduce myself. My name's Scott Durr. I live in Carroll Township with my beautiful wife, Tracy, who's here this evening. And I've been there for 8 years with her, and we've been in the area now. Well, she grew up in the area, of course, been in the area for 20 years. You know, I want to tell you a little bit about me. I'm a financial planner. I'm a small business owner, and as a father of 4 young girls, I want to make sure that this state, this great state that we live in, continues to thrive and do well. And as a financial planner, I have an obligation to my clients to tell them and explain to them the truth about their financial situation at all times. And I don't think in Harrisburg that's always been the case. I think that for far too long we've had too many politicians and too many people tell us too many things that was political hyperbole. I think that we've seen exaggerations. I think that we've seen things that aren't always the best in terms of what we need to do as if we were legislators. You know, going to, I think in terms of our ability or inability to be able to serve our constituents and our public, I think it takes a certain skill set. And I think that skill set is one that we have to look at and say, does that person bring the skills to Harrisburg that are necessary to be able to work with 203 other legislators, 50 senators, and a governor? You're not king when you get there. And you need to remember that you need to work with other lawmakers. You need to bring your ideas and present them. As a business owner, I possess some of those skills. I'm the only business owner. I'm a financial planner. I am the only veteran. I'm a Marine, actually. And I bring, I believe, the necessary skills in order to be able to do a good job in Harrisburg for you. Thank you.
Up next, Mr. Sigg.
Good evening. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. My name's William Sigg. I live in Newberry Township with my wife Betsy, who's here, and our 3-year-old son Will, who's also over there engrossed in some game of some sort. We also have a daughter on the way. We're going to have a little girl this summer, so we're very excited about that. Some of you have heard me say this before, but I believe it's worth repeating. I'm not a politician. I'm a husband and a father who's deeply concerned about the direction that our great Commonwealth is heading in. We need leaders who are willing to stand up and fight to grow our economy, to block costly federal mandates such as Obamacare, roll back the unsustainable Rendell-era spending programs that are crippling us still to this day. We need to reform our state government. We've been promised reforms for 6 years now, and I don't think a change in leadership quite qualifies as the reforms that we were all looking for. And finally, I want to protect our conservative values that we all hold dear. I grew up in rural Pennsylvania. I went to school in rural Pennsylvania. My wife and I wanted to be sure to move back to rural Pennsylvania to raise our family. We're very happy we did that. We absolutely love the area. We couldn't be happier with living here in the 92nd and in Newberry Township. That's it.
Mike Regan.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to start by thanking you for coming and thanking Bob and Chuck for hosting this event and the York County Republican Club. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here. My name is Mike Regan, and it's been Regan my entire life, but from now until election time, I appreciate everyone call me Reagan. I'm from Carroll Township, been there for 16 years, but I've been a resident of Central PA for my entire adult life. I live there with my beautiful wife, Fran, and our 4 kids. And I'm a retired U.S. Marshal. I just retired in September after 23 years in the U.S. Marshal Service. I began my career back in 1988 as a Deputy U.S. Marshal. I became commander of the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force in 1995, a job which I cherished and loved. I was appointed by President Bush in 2002 to serve as the U.S. Marshal for the Middle District of Pennsylvania, and I was confirmed by the U.S. Senate for that position. Where do I stand politically? I'm a conservative pretty much across the board. I believe in lower government, less government, lower taxes. I'm pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, pro-sportsman, pro-growth, pro-family. And those are the ideals that I'm going to take with me to serve you in Harrisburg. But I think more importantly than that, what I have and what I possess, what I think is valuable to this race, is I have a servant's heart. I have spent most of my adult life in service to our country and to this community. And if I am so fortunate enough to be elected to this position, I will serve you with honor and distinction. Thank you very much.
Anthony Pugliese.
I also want to thank everybody out for coming out tonight. This really is a great attendance. To introduce myself, my name is Anthony Pugliese. I was Governor Tom Corbett's Director of Legislative Affairs at the Department of Community and Economic Development. So I was actually one of the administration's senior advisors when it came to job creation. I really do believe that the economy is going to be the #1 issue in this election. How do we get people back to work? Too many people are losing their jobs, having a tough time putting food on the table, and this is exactly what my expertise is how do we get things back on track. I think that we certainly also need to make government more efficient. I'm the only one that's actually gone through the entire state budget and helped cut out $48 million of WAMs. When I went into my department, we had 127 programs. We now have 56. We cut our state budget by 35%. So I think that obviously our issues are we need to get the economy back on track, and that's what I've been doing for the administration and for the entire state for the past year and a half. We've helped create thousands and thousands of jobs, and also have the experience on how we can make government more efficient. I think that there's going to be a lot of people in this race who are going to make you a lot of promises, but I think that actions speak louder than words, and my actions have spoken for themselves. I'm the only one that's actually helped pass legislation that's created thousands and thousands of jobs, helped reduce taxes in Pennsylvania, and helped make Pennsylvania a better place to live and work. Thank you very much.
Dan Johnson.
Thank you. Well, good evening. My name is Dan Johnson, of course. I think we all have a common bond. While we haven't met before in the past, if you've ever gone on a business trip, or you've attended a wedding or a reunion, or perhaps you went on vacation with the kids in the back of a car, somewhere along the way you stayed at a hotel. And that's the industry that I'm from, the hospitality industry, where we take care of people. And over the past 19 years or so, starting at the very bottom, working my way from the dish pit up into management, I found that I had a certain knack for something that worked really well. See, I could go into facilities that were underperforming and struggling, financially or fundamentally, and I could go in and fix them, put them back on track for success. Tourism and hospitality is Pennsylvania's second largest industry. It employs over 400,000 people, roughly 7% of the state. So when it comes to jobs and taking things and turning them around, that's the same perspective that I want to take to Harrisburg. We all want lower taxes, we want less regulation, and a better Pennsylvania for all of our children. We all, of course, want that. Unlike my opponents, I can identify what's broken and fix it because I've done it time and time again in the private sector. I manage the largest hotel in York County. I'm responsible for 90 employees and their welfare, meeting payroll. I deal with multi-million-dollar budgets, ensuring that we hit the targets that we need to within that. But I also deal with the laws, rules, and regulations that this state passes and comes down on the backs both of us as citizens, but also from the business standpoint. I also work with multiple different departments that have some sort of regulation, from Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board onto the Department of Health, Agriculture, you name it. Somewhere along the way they touch a business that I'm involved in. So from that standpoint, the burden on our backs is intense, and that needs to change. And like you, it's very clear to me what the problems are in Pennsylvania. And my goal is to create an environment for economic growth where we eliminate taxes. We don't just reduce them, where we eliminate the mandates that are on state healthcare, or on policies for healthcare in the state, where we eliminate school property taxes and we go back to the way things were meant to be and fund them accordingly, where we cut or eliminate prevailing wage. We deal with legislative pensions. I'm a citizen, and my goal would be to be a citizen legislator. No pension, no perk, no pay raise, no per diem. I'm not interested in any of that stuff. The job is to go and to serve. And I'm interested in paying in my own health care, just as I do now in the private sector. And this isn't a long-term career for me. 3 terms maximum. If you like term limits, I'm imposing one on myself. So I can see the problem in state government as clearly as you can. My wife Casey and I have 2 daughters, one almost 5, one almost 2, and we want to give, the goal would be to have a Pennsylvania that's good for them, better than the one we have right now, and to leave things better than we found them. So that's what my interest is in running. That's why I'm running, and I look forward to answering all the questions we have tonight. So thanks again for coming.
Thank you to all the candidates for being here and participating. A couple quick points to make. We're here to hear you, so please don't be shy and pull those microphones close so everybody can hear all of the answers loud and clear. No candidate has any prior knowledge of any of my questions. In fact, many of these questions just spilled out of my mind minutes ago onto this paper. So we can promise you that this is going to be off the cuff. And the third point, I just want to make sure everybody's mindful of those time limits, and we'll get through as many questions as possible. Beginning with Scott Durr. Education reform has been a critical issue in the General Assembly. Mandate relief, school choice, education funding, formula, so on and so forth. What do you think is the single paramount issue when it comes to education, and how would you address it?
You know, I think the most important issue that are facing our school districts right now are the pension costs that are about to hit us. School property tax is huge. And today in the news, I don't know if anyone saw, there's a press release out of Hollidaysburg. They are anticipating that over the next 5 years that their school property taxes will increase by 2 mils per year for the next 5 years. On a $150,000 home, that's $300 a year. That's a $1,500 increase over the next 5 years. And that only addresses the pension issue. That doesn't address any other issues. We need serious property tax relief, and we need to look at creative ways of being able to get that to happen. We need to look at the gambling dollars. We need to reevaluate those dollars. We were sold that those dollars were going to be used for education and property tax relief. But before that, the ink on that bill was dried, there were people who were lined up looking for those dollars. I think it's extremely important that we visit and revisit those tax dollars. I think pensions are a huge issue. So I think that needs to be addressed, and I think that's one of the single most important facts of fixing our education, is getting that in line. Along with that, I think that we also need to evaluate our current curriculum. We need to make sure that our curriculum is what we need to educate our children. We need to make sure that they come out of school and they're well prepared to face either college or be able to enter the workforce. We need to make sure of that. We also know that we have a problem with salaries, and we have to address those issues as well with our teachers. So we've got to work with our school boards, and as a legislature, we need to make sure that we're enabling our school districts to be able to do the job that they can. The other issue that the school districts face, as well as our townships and municipalities, is prevailing wage. Our school districts have to be able to do business and take care of what's going on in their districts when they need.
Uh-oh.
All right.
You can all still read it. We all know we're talking about Republicans, right? We're good? Yeah. Okay.
I'm all right.
We'll make sure you get that time.
When dealing with prevailing wage, you know, there was a school district in York County, Southwestern School District, that recently had an $85,000 project and ended up needing to pay $145,000 for that project. It was the same workers, it was the same job, it was the same quality job. These are things that we've got to fix. The legislature has to untie the hands of school boards and school districts and municipalities so that they can do the job that they need to do to educate our children. I think those decisions have to be left at a local level, and that the state legislature needs to ensure that they allow those school districts to do the job that they can. Thank you.
In your time left, any specific way to attack pensions and that problem you've identified?
Yeah, I think, again, first, I think we need to look and reevaluate those gambling dollars. I think that's extremely important. Sure. There are 2 casinos that should be coming online in about the next 24 months. I can assure you that they will not be going broke, and they will have additional revenue dollars flowing in. Those dollars need to flow to the school districts, and they need to provide the property tax relief that we were told they were going to provide. And in addition, that will allow us to continue to fund those pensions.
And opening it up for anyone who would like to offer a rebuttal. Mr. Regan.
Yes. There's formulas that are presented by legislatures as to what school districts get what funds. And there's hold harmless agreements that are in place to make sure that certain school districts don't fall below certain funding. I think the problem with that is it doesn't account for growth. So a lot of school districts who have hold harmless agreements shrink in size, whereas the schools in our district, because they're good schools, are growing. They can grow up to 30% in a year, and funding does not cover that, especially when you have an excellent program for special needs children. Families will shop for school districts who have these good programs. So you have people coming in, an influx of people coming into your district. And if you experience a 30% increase and you're not funded for it, it can be problematic. So as your state representative, if I'm in Harrisburg, I'm going to be the guy who's trying to work those formulas to try to make them work for us. Because why should we have a smaller piece of the pie? And that's the way it's gone so far, and I think it's problematic, and I would work to try to correct that.
Other rebuttals? We'll go in order. Mr. Pugliese.
I think that it's just important to recognize one thing when we talk about funding for education. It's my opinion that I don't think that necessarily it's a funding problem, it's a spending problem. When you look at exactly how much we spend on public education in Pennsylvania with our federal, state, and local funding, we spend over $28 billion on education in Pennsylvania. To give you an idea of how big we're talking about, the entire state budget last year is $27.3 billion. So when we look at federal, state, and local funding, we spend $28 billion on education in Pennsylvania. So I don't think it's a matter of we need to keep throwing more money at the problem. We need to be more efficient, and we need to make sure that we are making sure that we give the Secretary of Education and those in the school districts the ability to really to look at more efficiency, and that way we are not just keep throwing more money at the problem, and we're getting the taxpayers getting the best bang for their buck.
Dan Johnson, a rebuttal.
Well, we talk about education, how to address it. I'm a big advocate of eliminating school property taxes. When sales tax was implemented in this state back in the early 50s, the actual long-form name of it was the Pennsylvania Education Sales Tax. Somewhere along the way, we moved away from that, and now it's on the burdens of every property owner. Why are property owners the only ones who are sharing in that expense? And when we talk about gambling revenues, Act 1, which was a successor of multiple other things that didn't work out so well, but Act 1 was designed to obviously offset, not entirely cover, through gambling revenues. That's great, but it hasn't happened to date, and to hope that in a few years that's going to occur, I certainly do hope so. We've put billions of dollars, as was mentioned, into the schools, and yet look at the product that we have at the end of the day. We have at least 100 school districts in this state that are going to declare financial distress. Who's going to pay for that? The state is mandated to come in and have to pick it up on their tab. That's going to be burdened by every person who pays taxes throughout the state, whether it's in your school district or not. So I'm not an advocate of taxing one entity to do another. I face that all the time in hotels. People want to tax a hotel stay to pay for somebody else's function. There are ways to fund things, ways to do it correctly, and I think it's both the spending, obviously prevailing wage, the construction costs that go into projects haven't been indexed for inflation. Lots of those issues need to be addressed. So it's more than just one or two areas. It's an across-the-board thing, starting with funding and how we spend money and what are the results we get from the money we put in. So.
Friendly reminder, let's try to keep rebuttals on, like a cross-examination in a courtroom, on the original question, and if you have a direct rebut to that candidate's answer, and you'll see why in a moment here. Question number 2 goes to Mr. Sigg. Education also brings up one of the most hated taxes, property taxes. What is your assessment of how this system is working right now, and then what would you pose as a solution?
Obviously, the system with property taxes isn't working. Every year, property taxes are going up. It's as they said earlier. I believe Anthony said it. It's a spending problem. For eight years under the Rendell administration, we threw money hand over fist at the schools. I haven't seen any improvement. We really need to prioritize what we're doing. In the previous question, one of the things that was mentioned was school choice. We're very lucky in our district that we've got 5 school districts that perform pretty well. Not everyone is that lucky. There's numerous schools and school districts that are failing. We need to help those kids get out of those failing schools. But back to the property taxes, gambling, we need to get that money back dedicated to where it's supposed to be, help the property taxes. I don't know about you guys, but when you're paying $3,500 and up in property taxes a year, a check for $200 isn't exactly property tax relief. If you drive a big truck, that's maybe 2 tanks of gas. So we need to rededicate that gambling money and get those property taxes down. And I support what the governor and the legislature did last year with reforming the property tax system, with eliminating some of those loopholes that schools had in order to raise property taxes without a referendum. We certainly need to get more checks on the schools, on the school districts and the boards and administrations to make it harder for them to raise taxes so they can live within their means like we have to at home.
Rebuttal specifically on property taxes, Mr. Reed.
I was knocking on doors last week, and I stopped at a house in Fairview Township and spoke to a gentleman, an elderly gentleman who was retired and living on a fixed income. And he wanted to talk about property taxes. So I said, well, what do you think? Are you getting any relief, because of the gambling money? He goes, last year I got $30. I pay $6,000 in property taxes, and I got $30 in relief. He said, I'm on a fixed income. My property taxes are more expensive than my mortgage. And there's a good chance at some point I'll lose my home. It's troubling, and I think many seniors are facing this. It's something that needs to be addressed, and there's so many ways you can address it. Gambling's one way. But, we got the prevailing wage issue, and, we just got to stop spending. We just have got to stop spending. Spending on the state level is just out of control. And I think, when Governor Rendell took office, our budget was $19 billion. When he left office 8 years later, it was $28 billion. Now, it took 226 years to get to $19 billion, and it took 8 years to add 9 more million to that. It's just ridiculous. So, we really should try to get to a point where seniors aren't paying property taxes anymore. I mean, that would be, I think, an excellent plan. I think we could do it with some fiscal responsibility. And that's what I'd like to achieve.
I think it's important to mention that, I agree, obviously, that we do need to have property tax reform, which is why I'm proud that I was actually one in the administration who helped work on the legislation that Mr. Sieg brought up that actually helped reduce and close some of the loopholes that would allow local governments to raise your taxes. I'm proud of that legislation, and I think that, again, actions do speak louder than words, and my actions have spoken. In regards to that, I do think that there's a couple things we need to do on property taxes. First, I think that we can look at what other loopholes they currently have. I think we could cap how much you could raise to the cost of living increase potentially. So then after that, then you would have to go to the voters to ask them. I know in my home township, Fairview Township, our tax was raised by 47%. I know that if you would have come and asked me, hey, can we raise your taxes by 47%? I would have said no, because in my home, we have to live within our means, and I think that we need to do a better job of making government live within their means as well, and that's what I would do if elected as your state representative.
Well, this is one of those topics that I'm very passionate about. Unlike some things that have been proposed recently in the news, I'm an advocate of eliminating that property tax. How would you do that? You want to have specifics? I'd be happy to tell you. There's a bill that's proposed called House Bill 1776 The Taxpayer Independence Act, totally support that because it does a couple things. By eliminating property taxes, multiple different ramifications are going to occur, and they're all positive. There's going to be an increase in property values, of course, because you don't have that burden on your back. You are going to have lower mortgage payments because you're not having to save for all of your taxes within your mortgage payment. So that puts more money back into your pocket. There's approximately $10 billion in property taxes that would go back in your hands. Now, what are you going to do with that money? You're going to spend it, save it, or you're going to give it away, all of which you're going to create an estimated 130,000 new jobs over the first 2 years. Those aren't my numbers. Those come from Moody's, if you're familiar with analyst firms. So if we want to take a look at a good way to spur this economy, create jobs, get things going again, one of the key ways to do that, including luring in businesses, is by eliminating that property tax, not just cutting it.
Okay. You have a rebuttal.
Yes.
Mr. Durko.
House Bill 1776, I think, as it's put forward, is a great idea because it does eliminate property taxes. As a financial planner, I sit across the table from people all the time who tell me how burdensome property taxes are. And much like Mr. Regan, I am told by these people who live that burden of paying those property taxes, who tell me they're going to be out of their house. So I think House Bill 1776 is extremely important. However, the one thing that you need to consider in there is that there would need to be a constitutional amendment that would take place. See, what we can't have is we can't have the government with one hand in one pocket and putting the other hand in the other pocket and telling you that it's okay. We need to make sure that they're not digging deeper in both pockets. We would have to make sure that there was a constitutional amendment that eliminated property taxes permanently if we were to go to a sales tax. I think it's extremely important that we make sure that anyone when that passage of that bill happens, that make sure that that constitutional amendment is there.
Question for Mr. Regan next. Mr. Regan, do you favor school vouchers? And if the answer is yes, what will you do to address children who don't receive them who are attending failing school districts across Pennsylvania?
Well, I think the way the bill's written currently is that's who it goes to, failing schools in depressed neighborhoods. So I support the bill in that form. I have a little bit of a concern about the bill as it would progress and move forward. It seems like it's almost a kind of a nose underneath the tent. I do have a fear about it affecting good schools. For instance, if you offer somebody who lives in the Northern School District a $9,000 voucher, and they have kids in school, and they have kids maybe who play sports, they may take you up on that, take that $9,000 and move their kid to Trinity or a private school. Maybe it's for academics, maybe it's for sports, but that starts to, and our schools aren't underperforming, they're doing well. So my concern is that vouchers could, in the long run, affect good schools, affect good teachers, affect people somewhere where it's not a problem. But as far as the way the bill's written, I support it because I think it affects the people it should affect. It goes to the people who you can't help where they're born. They can't help the schools are the way they are. It gives them an opportunity. But I think it's important that the voucher would include not just private schools or charter schools, but also public schools that are well-performing, that just kids could go to public schools as well.
Rebuttal.
I also would support Senate Bill 1. I think that, as mentioned, that it does this bill, the way it's currently written, only is affecting the bottom, the worst schools in the Commonwealth. So I think that it certainly is a good start, but I would support vouchers overall because, in my opinion, as a taxpayer, I'm paying for schools, and if I have a child and I'm not happy with the education they're getting, why shouldn't I, as a parent, have the ability to make a decision that I think is in the best interest of my child? I do support having the funding follow that child because at the end of the day, I think that nobody knows what your child needs more than the parent.
Others?
When it comes to vouchers, absolutely. I mean, if you love a free market society, and that's what our nation certainly was strong at in the past, it's kind of declined a little bit. We need to get back to that. But if you support free market and you support competition, then absolutely you have to support vouchers. We don't want to have a monopoly on anything, but getting kids out of schools that they're stuck in, as was mentioned, that they don't have a choice on, and perhaps they're surrounded by those who just aren't teaching them well, whatever the situation might be. and having them to have an opportunity on a school that is doing well, that's a benefit to that child. And of course, that community gets another person on the roll. Those tax dollars come into that community. It's a benefit. It's a plus. So absolutely, I don't see that as a negative. And then those schools that start losing individuals are going to have to get in gear. They're going to have to get the right people back in place and compete a little bit. And then once again, we start fighting for good education in this country. So absolutely, support vouchers.
I think that vouchers are a good idea. However, I think that the bill is flawed in that it picks winners and losers. I think that if you're going to provide vouchers, you need to provide vouchers for all taxpayers. You need to provide vouchers for any citizen that wants to send their child or their children to the school of their choice. I'm not in favor of this bill because of the way it's written.
As I said earlier, we're very fortunate in the 92nd. We have 5 school districts that perform very well. So we're lucky in that regards, but we need to look out for the kids in the inner city schools that aren't as lucky as our kids are with the schools. So I would support vouchers for failing schools.
Mr. Pugliese, last year the General Assembly and the governor reduced state spending for the first time in a while, proposing a cut to higher education. It was rolled back from what the governor had originally wanted, and now the governor's proposal again proposes a steep cut to higher education. The question is, what is government's role when it comes to higher education in your view?
Well, I think first I just want to say you're right. Last year the administration did find, I believe, about $4 billion. This was the first time in, I think, about 40 years that we actually had an on-time. The budget was less than it was the previous year. And I'm proud that I was part of the team that helped do that. And how did we do that? We helped, as I mentioned, I helped actually reduce my own state budget in the Department of Community and Economic Development by 35%. We found all the WAMs, the wasteful spending, saved the taxpayers over $48 million. And we found the programs that weren't working, and we cut them out. So that way the taxpayers are getting the best bang for their buck. In regards to education, I do believe that we as a society need to make sure that our students are given the opportunities to succeed in the global economy. At the same time, I do have concerns about the way education, especially higher education, the cost is going up year in and year after year. When you look at exactly how the funding for our higher educations have gone over the past 10 years or so, we've continued to fund them, but the cost has gone up over and over again, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I think that I saw one statistic that one of our higher education schools had 4 employees to every 1 student. That doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. So I think, again, we need to make sure that we are forcing our schools to look at themselves, look at the budget, and not just keep coming back to the taxpayers saying we need more money, and really doing the scare tax that we see them doing every year when it comes down to budget season.
Rebuttals specifically on government's role respecting higher education.
Well, you just mentioned leading into it that state spending dropped. That's great, 0.1%. I guess we'll take it. But I think the state's role in education is that it should advocate it as needed, but we have to remember that we do spend recklessly. And where do we put all of the funds? Where does it go? You see that the schools, including higher education, we're having fewer and fewer people turn out. There's a higher dropout. People aren't going to college. Maybe that's not such a bad thing in some ways. It doesn't mean everyone has to go to college. There are plenty of people who haven't and make a very successful career out of their lives. I'm one of those people. So I think that the state's role is to take a look at where the funding goes and to support and advocate people to go and have an opportunity to better themselves. But I reject this notion all the time that comes about when it comes to cuts, that it's always got to be the same 3 things: police, fire, and schools. Maybe we just take a look at that budget with that small cut that's there and go back and find money that needs to go where it should be and not waste it in areas where it's just inefficient and ineffective.
Next, a rebuttal on higher education.
Well, I mean, it seems like one of the problems with our budget is money is going places where it's being squandered. There's waste, fraud, and abuse. Specifically, the welfare budget. I spent some time as a Deputy Inspector General for Pennsylvania, and we investigated waste, fraud, and abuse in state government. And I had a bird's eye view of waste, fraud, and abuse. We had information of people using their EBT cards, which is like a MAC card for welfare people, to get tattoos, to go to strip clubs, go to off-track betting sites, do things like that. I mean, the fraud, waste, and abuse is alarming, and it's throwing millions and millions of dollars into a bottomless pit. And the problem with that is it's crowding out, that spending, that $11 billion of state money and a $27 billion total with the federal subsidies is crowding out things that are important, like education spending. I think Governor Corbett is on the right track, and he was really handed a real mess, and I think he's working at it. But I think that's one area where we really need to look close at it, because there is a lot of money that we could save every year if we just got that system under control. And higher education spending is one way we could help.
Mr. Johnson, your question. Budgets are obviously about priorities, and lately budgets have been defined by cuts. Which areas would you fight for increases in funding in the next state budget if you were elected?
Well, that's a good question. The overall problem with our state is where we're spending in things that we know aren't doing quite so well. There are automatic increases that are worked into all different sorts of areas, from Department of Public Welfare. We'll see the increases that are mandated through Obamacare, depending on what happens here soon. The key areas are where this state can be competitive and where we can grow. You know, if we're talking about bringing businesses into Pennsylvania, there are some that advocate for all these incentives, such as the new plan that's coming in, but that plan is not going to pay taxes for 15 years. So if we go back and take a look at what that budget has, and we build it from the top down instead of the bottom up, we come up with the focus that the money that comes in, that is paid, that's all there is to spend. And then we identify and prioritize those areas. Every single dollar is prioritized. And we make sure that a return on investment comes from every dollar spent. And then those departments that want a little bit of an increase, want to spend some more money, or have a great idea for something, they need to advocate for it and prove that there is a return on investment. We have to be very careful with every tax dollar that we collect. And so the areas that I would fight for are the ones that are the most key, obviously. We're talking about education. That's something that's important. We want to make sure the state is competitive in the future. We need to make sure that the universities and schools are funded. But at the same time, we have to go back through and make sure that the expenses that we're spending out there are not frugal, waste, fraud, abuse, all those great things we always hear about. Once we do that, I think we're going to find a lot more money in there that doesn't need to be spent where it is, and we can reallocate it, and so we're almost net neutral.
Rebuttals. Others, specifically, which areas of the state budget you would advocate for an increase despite the difficult budget time? Mr. C.
I honestly don't think we need to increase in a lot of areas. There is so much efficiency to be had in state government. I worked on a commission in the state Senate that identified almost $500 million in potential savings for the state just through efficiencies alone. If we actually get in there with the governor who is willing to work with us, when I was working with that commission, it was during the Rendell administration. They didn't like the findings that we came up with, which told most of us that we were probably looking in the right spots. So if we just actually get in there and dig through the books with the governor who's willing to open them up with us, we can find so much efficiency that we don't need to raise taxes. We don't need to cut services. And we can, basically, it's a net increase in funding across the board by just eliminating the waste that's there through inefficient government, which we all know we have.
I'm not really plugging for my old agency, but I think that the Inspector General's office would be an agency that should get an increase in budget, because there is so much waste, fraud, and abuse going on in state government. And that's the agency tasked with investigating it, and they have about 300 employees. It's not enough to get it all done. For all that's going on, they need a lot more people, a lot more help. And I think it would be a worthy investment, because the millions in return that we could provide the taxpayer with the fraud if the fraud was uncovered by these individuals, by these investigators, which it would be. So I think that's an agency that could use a bump.
Absolutely.
I would agree that the Office of the Inspector General would be a department that I would give a little bit more funding to. As Mr. Regan said, there is a lot of fraud and waste in state government. That is a good department, and that they are really tasked with trying to fight that. I do also believe that the Department of Community and Economic Development could use a little extra bump in funding. I think that is the jobs department, and that's the job, that's the agency that I came from. We are the ones, the Department of Community and Economic Development was the agency that went in and fought for companies to come into Pennsylvania day in and day out. What most people don't understand is that we truly are in a war an economic development war with our surrounding states and nations. Every single day, you have surrounding states and countries calling our companies and trying to incentivize them to leave Pennsylvania. Mr. Johnson brought up the fact that we were going to be giving 15 years of tax reductions for the plant in Beaver County, the Shell Corporation. Well, I was actually proud to be one of the lead negotiators in actually passing that legislation. I'll tell you why. As a result from that, Pennsylvania will see approximately about 50,000 jobs, new jobs to Pennsylvania, and also around $5 billion of investment. So I'm okay with giving them a little incentive. You give a little bit, you get a lot. You have other states, West Virginia and Ohio, who are offering them everything they could. In fact, one of them, I think West Virginia, offered them 25 years of incentives. But I think that Pennsylvania and my agency really made the argument that this is, we have the trained workforce, we have the infrastructure, and that at the end of the day, Pennsylvania is the place where you want to be. And so I would support giving the department that really is the jobs department, understanding that the economy really is the number one issue. Let's give them the resources to really help people get back to work.
Rebuttal, Mr. Durr.
Yes, I don't want to disagree with Mr. Pugliese and what the importance of the DCED is at this point in time. I think that what it says and it shows us is that Pennsylvania is not competitive when it comes to business. I would like to eliminate the DCED. We need to make Pennsylvania more competitive. We need to lower taxes on our corporations. We need to close corporate loopholes. We had $750 million of corporate welfare last year. We built ballparks, we gave money away and grants away. And as a small business owner, I've got to tell you, nothing irritates me more than the field is not level when you play on it. So I believe that one of the things that we need to do is to take a look at the DCED, and that's one of the areas that we should cut. And it's not anything to do with anything other than our state's not competitive, and we need to be more competitive.
A response, Mr. Pugliese?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is truly the difference between those who actually have competed with our surrounding states and nations and those who have not. I think that this shows a lack of experience, in my opinion. It's amazing, really. I agree with you philosophically that we shouldn't be giving these incentives and these options away to companies, but that's not the reality. That's not the world that we live in. So, if we wouldn't have had DCD, we would not have had 50,000 new jobs coming to Pennsylvania. We would not have had $5 billion of new investment coming. And that's just some of what DCD does. You want to cut DCD. For example, you get some of the highest return on investments in that department out of all the state government. We have a department, our international business development, that gets a 93-to-1 return on investment. The governor's action team, which is the one who actually goes in and competes with businesses, get a 68-to-1 return on investment. So it's one thing to say theoretically it's great, let's get rid of the Department of Community and Economic Development, but those of us who live in the real world and actually compete with to try to get companies in Pennsylvania know that that's not something we can actually do.
I think your positions are quite clear. Is there anybody else who...
I live in the real world and work in the real world, not one where I receive incentives to do business every day.
Anyone else on that subject?
Yeah.
Mr. Regan.
Yes. We investigated a case through, at the request of DCD, of a WHAM grant that went $28 million that went out to a nonprofit in Philadelphia. $28 million of taxpayer money where it was supposed to revitalize an area. Unfortunately, the only thing that got revitalized were the pockets of the individuals who were getting the $28 million. So there was some real reckless spending and very little oversight going on coming out the doors of DCD. It was very alarming. I got to say, Governor Corbett came along and said, we got to stop this right now. But unfortunately, they still had to administer, even under his watch, they had to administer some of these grants that had been handed out. So when you think about that $28 million that went to this one, and there was hundreds of them, folks, hundreds of them. Just think of that $28 million that went out to that one group in Philadelphia, and think that what that could have done to an elementary school, or what that could have done to send a kid through college, or what the value there wasted, and that's our taxpayer money. We need to do something about that.
No response? Yep. Okay, yep. We're going to do something a little bit different. We have a question that we would like all of the candidates to answer, so we'll do a little bit of a lightning round. I think we could probably do these 2 minutes apiece. If you differ with me on that, let me know. The question is, Have you or will you accept monies from political action committees? If the answer is yes, have you taken money from any PACs that have differing agendas or platforms which are contrary from the Republican Party? And we'll begin, Mr. Durr.
No, I haven't received any monies from any PACs at this point. I would take money from PACs where I agreed philosophically we shared the same values. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I do disagree when you do go out and you take money from anyone who you possibly can, because I think that then you owe a favor. And I think too many times in Harrisburg we've got far too many politicians that owe favors to special interest groups. It's just the reality of the situation. And I would only take money from PACs that I agree with in principle and in value.
I have taken money from PACs, and to the best of my knowledge, none of them have differing agendas with the Republican Party.
I have not taken any money from PACs. And I kind of agree with Mr. Durr in that it would depend on what the PAC was. If it's something that runs afoul of my beliefs or what I think is right, I wouldn't accept it. But to this point, I have not been offered, so I haven't taken anything.
I have received some political action money, but I think, as was said, I would agree with the fact that I would not accept the money if it was supporting an agenda that I didn't support. I think that political action committees do help in regards to help the candidate get the message out. And so, as was said, I think that as long as their agenda aligns with mine, then I don't think there's an issue with that.
Well, I haven't received any money from any PACs, and I don't think they'll be offered any either. I've been funded through family and friends and people that I'm going door to door to, and that's kind of the direction I'm going. As far as if it differs from the ideals of the Republican Party, been a Republican forever. But there are those within our party. I think the popular term is rhino, who they'll say one thing, but then they'll kind of lean another way. I'm a strict guy on being a conservative and being financially conservative at the same time. So it's not where I'm headed. It's not come thus far, and there's 30-something days left, so I don't think it's going to happen for me.
Mr. Durr, your question now. Women's reproductive health has been in the news a lot lately, with everything from insurance coverage of contraception to mandatory ultrasounds dominating the political conversation in Harrisburg. In the context of attempting to have less government in our lives, do you believe the Republican Party has gone too far in asserting itself into the health care decisions of women and their physicians?
If you're referring specifically to House Bill 1077, no, I don't. I am pro-life, and unashamed to say that I'm pro-life. Life begins at conception and ends at natural death.
Any other candidates on the question? Mr. Sig.
I, too, am pro-life, very staunchly so. As Mr. Durr said, life, to me, starts at conception. We need to protect the lives of the unborn. I support I believe it was the ultrasound legislation that was cited. I support non-invasive procedure with that. Ultimately, we need to work towards developing and being able to present alternative options to abortion. That's where we need to go, and that's what I would like to work towards doing if I'm elected.
On the question, have Republicans gone too far with respect to this specific issue, Mr. Regan?
I don't think they have. I think it's important. I can remember when my first child was born 17 years ago. I can remember the concept of pregnancy. I understood the concept of pregnancy, but the reality of pregnancy didn't hit me until I saw that flickering heartbeat on the ultrasound. And I think that flickering heartbeat could be something that would keep a young girl from getting an abortion. I think it's important. I agree that it shouldn't be invasive, but I think that it could be something that that screen, that little flicker of light that's blinking, could be something that could save a life. And I think it's great legislation. I'd support it.
I would just also agree. I mean, I'm pro-life. Believe we need to protect the sanctity of life. And I think, as Mr. Regan said, I think that sometimes it doesn't really, the reality doesn't really hit you until you see the ultrasound and you see that beating a heart. So I think that if we can protect one human life by that, I think that it's worth it.
Well, I guess I'll just round it out. Same situation, pro-life. I've got $2. I couldn't imagine life without them at this point, and seeing them on the ultrasound, since that's the topic of the moment, that changed my life forever. I know that. We had difficulty having children, so it took a long time. Not for not any trying, but it took for a long time. And we were looking into adoption. Adoption was a possibility, but when that happened for us, I just can't imagine that anybody could go through that. And so I think we're good where we are.
Next question for Mr. Sig. Do you feel it was a mistake for members of the House of Representatives to unanimously declare 2012 the year of the Bible?
Nope.
You can elaborate or you can leave it at that.
I'm good.
Very good. Any other candidates would like to weigh in on that issue? Obviously, there has been two sides to that story. Maybe not here at the Republican debate, but just checking. Mr. Regan.
It's annoying to me as a conservative, as a Christian, that we always seem to be running from God and running from the Bible. I think that, if everyone lived by the Bible, by the tenets of the Bible, we wouldn't have any problems. I think it's wonderful that the legislature did that, and I think that it's important that we all realize that God is our Creator and embrace it. Don't run from it. Thank you.
Other candidates on the Year of the Bible resolution. Mr. Durr.
I agree with what Mike said. I'm a conservative. I'm a Christian. My three of my children go to Bible release every week. They spend time. They're able to leave school, and they're able to do that. However, I do have a concern with the resolution in that I don't think that it's the people's business. I know that Representative Seth Grove has said that he's received calls to his office from around the nation, around the state, and around the world. His staff now has to address those issues on that resolution in particular. So I think that you have to take a look at those resolutions, no matter what that resolution happens to be, and you have to make the decision, is it the people's business, and does it interfere with your daily task of being a legislator? And so it's not that I disagree as a conservative Christian that it shouldn't be the year of the Bible. I think it should be the year of the Bible every year. But what I don't agree with is that it's the people's business.
Mr. Pugliese.
I think I would honestly have to probably agree. Although personally I am religious, I'm a Catholic. I grew up, went to a Catholic school, and so although I personally wouldn't have a problem with I read the Bible. I am religious. At the end of the day, I think that the state and as a legislator, we have better things that we need to be doing. We need to help get people back to work, move the economy forward, and we need to be more efficient with all of our time.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. I would agree with that. I don't have a problem with it, but my gosh, aren't there so many things that the state needs to be doing right now, from property taxes to spending to budgets to borrowing. I mean, again, with that whole budget cut, great, 0.1%. To me in business, that's flat. That's not really a big enough cut. So by all means, that's great. Pass it, but let's move on and let's get some actual business of the people done. So that's where I stand on that.
Mr. Regan, your question now. What would you say is, and I'm going to hold you to this, the number one and only one issue for residents of the 92nd District? Top issue.
I think it's people want to see fiscal responsibility. They're tired of seeing their tax dollars being spent improperly and unwisely. They see all these projects. They see all the welfare that's being paid out. They see all these things that people are getting, and they're all, what's happening with them is they're either out of work or they're not making enough money to get by. Their property taxes are too high, and they just want their government to work more efficiently for them. I think they truly believe that lawmakers are more concerned about their own lives. They're more concerned about getting reelected. They're more concerned about themselves than they are about the citizens. And I think they feel like they're suffering because of that. They want representation they can trust, someone who's going to make the right decisions for them to make their lives better. And right now I don't think they feel that. So I think it all revolves around fiscal responsibility.
Others. Mr. Pugliese, top issue for residents of this district?
I would agree with Mr. Regan, but I think I think the number one issue that when I'm going door to door is the economy. It's how we get people back to work, and I think that Pennsylvania really is very uncompetitive in regards to our tax and regulatory climate. We have the second highest corporate net income tax in the entire country, only behind Iowa at 9.99%. We have a corporate stock and franchise tax that although we are starting to finally phase out. Once again, there are some who are trying to stop that again. And I think that at the end of the day, for the people of the 92nd, we've lost a lot of manufacturing jobs in these past couple decades. A lot of people are out of work. And I think that it was my office that actually, if you were a company looking to come back to Pennsylvania, you would have called my office. And I can tell you firsthand, there are companies who like this general part of the United States because geographically we are so close to so much of the U.S. population. We have a lot of the infrastructure and we have a lot of the skilled, trained workforce that they're looking for. I think we just need to be smart and not shoot ourselves in the foot from a tax and regulatory side. And that's really what my expertise is and what I would do as your state representative to make sure that we can compete with our surrounding states and nations from a tax and regulatory side so we can capture those jobs and get people back to work.
Well, I think the number one issue that impacts everyone in our district and then across the state, of course, comes back to taxes, property taxes in general. It impacts businesses, it impacts property owners. What do we get in return? Troubled schools, problematic roads, takes forever to get things done. So for me, Pennsylvania is ranked at the bottom for a reason. We haven't been good fiscal stewards with the money that's coming in. So we start with property tax. That is going to have a ripple effect that's going to benefit everything out beyond just that, from jobs, the economy, to growth. So definitely property tax for me.
Okay. Mr. Pugliese, your question now. We just had a round of public corruption convictions involving those with ties to the state capitol and state government. What is a reform or change you would like to see made in the General Assembly?
I think that we, if I've given the opportunity as a legislator, I think we, as a citizen, need to demand greater transparency in state government. We do need to ensure that the people's money is being used, efficiently. It's not being spent fraudulently, and so that's really what I think we need to do a better job of really opening the doors of state government and improving our transparency. Others in the wake of corruption investigations on what they would like to reform about state government. Mr. Johnson.
I think that, whatever happened to personal accountability, I think it went on a vacation a long time ago. You get elected, you have an honor to serve, you go in there, and then what happens? It seems the longer that you're there, the more roots grow out of you, and you stay there forever, and that becomes your career. So for me, I can prevent that because obviously imposing on myself a term limit, but the longer you're there, the more problems occur, and I think a citizen legislature, one where you go in, you do the job, and then you get out. You do what you can do, and you make sure that other people can serve, helps prevent that. You can certainly impose higher restrictions and penalties for those people that line their own pockets, but for me, that's not going to happen. Get in, do the work that needs to be done, and move on and let others serve. Keep that cycle going the way it was intended to be.
Mr. Sig.
I believe we need term limits. I believe we need to reduce the size of the legislature. I will happily introduce legislation doing that, whether it be constitutional amendments, but I would happily do that. Mr. Pugliese mentioned transparency. I plan on day one posting my expenses online every month so everyone can see them. They'll know where I'm spending and, most importantly, not spending our tax dollars.
And Mr. Durr.
I think there's too much money in the system. I think that it provides an opportunity for corruption when there's too much money. I think there are far too many lobbyists involved. I think there are far too many PACs involved. And I think when a politician feels the need to pay a favor back, they make bad decisions. I think that everyone goes in with good intentions. I think what happens is once they're there, when they're on the hook for that, that's a problem. I think that we need to reform the election process. A couple of the candidates up here have said that they've received money from PACs. And that's fine if they agree in their values and the principles there. But I think that when you look at the money, and the expenses will come out soon, take a look at the money that was received and how much was received. And I think it's important to see who owes who a favor.
Other candidates. Mr. Regan.
Yeah, I think Dan hit the nail on the head when he said about personal responsibility. I mean, these are grown men here. But I think, many of them said, look, we were just doing what everyone else was doing, and basically saying the whole system is corrupt. But I think it's important maybe to implement ethics training for legislators, because maybe you come in there and things are done a certain way, and you may think it's right. I think maybe train them, provide them with, and so there's nobody say I didn't know we couldn't do this. Give them. I know as a U.S. Marshal, I went through ethics training once a year. Every year I was there as a requirement. It's to remind you that you can't do certain things, but you would think grown men, grown legislators could determine the difference, but just so they can't say they weren't told they couldn't do it, train them.
Okay. Mr. Johnson, your question as we round out round two. As you know, we have an aging population in Pennsylvania and a working class that is sometimes leaving the state. How do you plan to ensure that you'll have a tax base to handle the increases in state spending often necessary to support an aging population in a state like ours?
Great question. The challenge, of course, as you said, people are migrating out of the state. It's another one of those areas that we're ranked one of the lowest in of outward job migration. We'd mentioned earlier about offering incentives and getting businesses to come in, to lure people in, more jobs, that kind of helps fix that base, but it's always targeted in these little zones, an opportunity zone here and there. Why don't we make the entire state a keystone opportunity zone? Make ourselves competitive, changing the way we tax corporations and luring business in, making us look better than other states that are in the area. We eliminate property taxes, we improve values, people want to invest, come here, they can afford homes. So if you can draw people into this state, you improve that tax base. It's happened over and over again when you look at states that are either right to work or those that have made their states competitive and are luring businesses in. A few years ago, we almost lost Harley-Davidson. The package was given to them. Those jobs would have went elsewhere. So in order to make sure that we have the tax base to sustain the demands and the needs for those who are in retirement or approaching the retirement age, we have to lure people in. We have to give an incentive or a reason to do that. It doesn't necessarily mean have to be free taxes. But what's the reason to come to Pennsylvania? Is it education? Is it housing? What might it be? So we take a look at all those things. But I think if we make the entire state an opportunity zone, people want to come here. Give them a reason to do that.
Other candidates? Mr. Pugliese.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, as it was said, I think that the big issue for us is how are we going to pay for this, our seniors and whatever the other obligations that we might have. It's going to be how we have to get people back to work. We have to bring more jobs in the state. You have a job now, that person's paying taxes. They're not on the public dime, if they're on public welfare or whatever else it might be. I really do believe that the economy is the center point of this election. I think that it would be a ripple effect if we can get people back to work. I think that's really the number one issue. And as was said, it really is amazing. As Dan said, we really do have states and other countries calling our companies every day to try to lure them out. And I think that there's a lot that we can do to stop that, and to not only stop that, but to have companies really choose Pennsylvania. And again, I think that a lot of that has to do with the tax and regulatory side. When you have the second highest corporate net income tax in the entire country, and we're one of the only states that also has a capital stock and franchise tax, you look at these business relocating magazines, they say stay out of Pennsylvania. And that's what a lot of companies are doing. So, if you want to, have people get people back to work and have money to really take care of the obligations that we have and we're going to have, we have to turn the sign around and really have Pennsylvania open for business.
We have another question we'd like all of the candidates to answer at this point. Do you have any family members who work in or have other ties to state governments, like a lobbyist, for example, in Harrisburg? And if so, how would you personally manage that, what could be viewed by some as a conflict of interest? We'll begin with Mr. Durr.
No.
Could be a quick one, folks. You never know. Mr. Sig.
My uncle is Senator Jake Corman. He's the Appropriations Chairman. I love my uncle. I respect everything that he's been able to become as a legislator. I aspire to be just like him, but I will not be a proxy of Jake Corman in the State House. I will be a proxy for the people of the 92nd District.
Mr. Regan.
No, I do not.
Mr. Pugliese.
My father is a consultant, but I think at the end of the day, and I am very proud of the work that he's done. But I think at the end of the day, he and I do have an agreement that we don't discuss issues. We do have a line that's cut in the sand, and we don't cross that. So obviously, I was in the Corbett administration, so we've already confronted this issue, and it's never been an issue before. And I would continue to fight and use the knowledge that I've gained over the past several years to really fight for the people of the 92nd and not let family ties affect my decisions.
Mr. Johnson.
I don't have anybody in government. It's just me and my family in the area, so that's not going to be a problem for me at all. Don't have to worry about that.
Thank you all. I think we're going to make it, folks. We have one more round of questions for everybody, and then, of course, the closing statements. So looks like we're on time. We'll come back to you, Mr. Durr, at this point. As you probably have noticed, Pennsylvania's roads and bridges are in dire need of repair and, in some cases, flat-out replacement. How do you propose raising the money needed to pay for those investments? I think we can all agree that it's not in the budget right now.
It's not in the budget. And the roads are in disrepair. And I think what needs to be looked at, again, and I go back to this, is we need to take a look at the PennDOT budget. We need to go in there and we need to take a look. When I drive down 581 West and I take a look and I see two trucks that are sitting up on the side with plows in the weather, it's 40 degrees and sunny, I'm confused just a bit as to why those trucks are there. When I'm someplace out to eat and I have someone from PennDOT tell me that they like to pull their truck up into the side woods and sit there for hours, that's abuse of the system. There's plenty of waste at PennDOT. There's plenty of issues that go on. I would also say that privatization of the Liquor Control Board. I believe that the liquor stores need to be privatized, and we should take that one-time shot that we receive. We should put half of it towards our roads and bridges, and we should take the other half and put it into the pension. Address the pension problem.
And just a footnote here, you will all get a chance to weigh in on privatizing the state stores shortly. So if we could keep rebuttals on this question specifically to, even though that was part of your answer, to the transportation funding issue, that would be great. Mr. Sig.
I support the TFAC report. Before I was running for office here, I was an employee at PennDOT. I ran a program where we were looking for ways to cut costs, increase efficiency, and improve employee safety. Those were three goals that were important to the secretary, and he trusted me to run that program for him. And that was just the start of our modernization efforts at PennDOT. We were just starting to scratch the surface and improving the way that they do business. The TFAC report that came out, I believe it was last August, is a great starting point. It's a great blueprint for ways to raise transportation funding here in the state. I don't agree with everything that was in that report. Part of it contained an increase to the gas tax. Gas is approaching $4 a gallon again. Obviously, I don't want to pay $4 a gallon. We need to find a way to lower gas prices, so any increase to the gas tax should be off the table as part of the TFAC report.
Mr. Regan, on the way to raise money for road and bridge repairs.
Well, we currently are paying $61,000 per highway mile right now. And that's what's in the budget. And that's higher than 41 other states. I think we need to focus on what's important. I think sometimes we end up spending money on beautification projects like rails to trails and building things that are good things. But when we have 5,000 bridges in Pennsylvania that need to be fixed, we need to use our funds and focus on fixing it, prioritizing, and focusing on things that could cause bodily harm to somebody. So I think that's a big problem. But I think there's things that are happening with monies from the transportation budget that aren't important. We need to prioritize and use the money that we have to do things that are going to potentially save lives.
Other candidates. Mr. Pugliese.
Yeah, I do believe that there's a lot that we obviously need to do in regards to our state's transportation infrastructure. We're one of the worst in the country. I think that there's a lot of efficiencies that really could be made, and that's really would be one of the avenues I would look at. You look at, for example, you have the maintenance sheds, and every single county and municipality they all do this. They buy their own. Independently they buy their own supplies to help for their maintenance. If we would look as a state and really bundle and buy that all as one, there's a lot of savings we could do from that. I do support a lot of what was on the transportation report that was recently done under the Corbett administration, and as someone who actually helped develop the entire Commonwealth's transportation policy, I think that I know for a fact there are a lot of efficiencies that we can do, and we really need to look at technology and look towards the future and not just use a lot of the methods in the past.
Mr. Johnson.
Well, originally, as I heard the question posed, I would absolutely disagree that we need to raise any money. I think we have plenty that's already there. If we prioritize every single dollar that we have, planting flowers and building bike trails sure are nice, a leftover of the Johnson administration, President Johnson. But at the expense of roads and bridges? Come on, where's the sense in that? If we take a look at public-private partnerships, or P3s, different things that we can privatize. You can privatize the turnpike, different rest stops. You get better service, better quality, instead of letting the state carry all those expenses on their back. But we also have to look at lobbying. There are those within the Transportation Department who've lobbied state legislators $25,000 a month to direct funds their way. There's people who've lobbied in D.C. $250,000. For what? That money should have gone where it was always to go, and that's back to roads and bridges. Once we get all that square, then we can go back and talk about bike trails and flowers and all that other great stuff. Let's address what's key to everyone first, and that's safety.
Other candidates? Mr. Sig, your question now. Straightforward. Do you favor selling or leasing the Pennsylvania Turnpike? And please explain your answer.
We need to reform the Turnpike. I do not believe we should sell it at this point. There are a lot of reforms. There's a lot of efficiencies that can be had at the Turnpike. We need to streamline. We need better coordination between the Turnpike and PennDOT. The duplication of services between the two is enormous, and there's a lot of money that could be saved on both ends by streamlining, coordinating what they do. But at this time, I would not support selling or leasing of the Turnpike.
Other candidates on selling or leasing the Turnpike to raise money to use however, I'd imagine. Mom. Oh, Mr. Johnson.
I'll just, because I mentioned it in the earlier conversation, I think that tolls keep going up on the Turnpike. If you drive it regularly, do you have a better system of roads on the Turnpike? No, you don't. If we privatize it, public-private partnership, we have an opportunity there to get service and quality back into that, lower expenses. So I'm absolutely for looking into that.
Mr. Regan, your question, would you be in favor of specifically increasing driver's fees like registrations and driver's license fees in order to help raise money to ease the transportation funding problem we have?
No, I would not be. Like I said, I believe we're funded enough. I think we need to tighten our belts and use the money that we have, spend it efficiently, spend it prudently, and don't continue to raise prices. It seems like there's a theme in state government: mismanage money, spend too much, and then ask the taxpayers for more. It's not fair. I don't think we should bear any more fees than we're already bearing. Too many taxes, too much of this going on. I think we need to live within our budgets and do what we have to do with the money that's given to us without further taxing and further harassing the citizens.
A question designed to hone right in on a funding mechanism that would impact drivers' wallets. Anyone else care to share their view on whether or not you would support raising the fees drivers pay to pay for transportation improvements? It would be somewhat of a user tax increase. Mr. Durr.
My answer is absolutely not. And I think what happens is when we increase those fees, we hit the most vulnerable among us. We hit those who can't afford the additional $20, who can't afford the additional $30 or $40. We've got to stop thinking that an extra 20 here or an extra 1% there isn't important to the budgets of the citizens of the state. We've got to do with what we have. And I think that the state needs to be fiduciaries when it comes to dealing with your money. It's not the state's money, it's your money, and I think that that needs to be looked at, and we can't increase these fees. They're nuisances.
Other candidates? Mr. Johnson.
I would just say, obviously, raising fees doesn't make any sense. We already spend all this money on all these other things, and what do we get for them in return? You know, in business, you can deal with the challenges that you face every day, but there comes a point where you just can't raise things anymore. You have to make the cuts that are necessary in order to utilize the funds that you already have and use them properly. So I absolutely agree, don't raise any of those funds. Use the money we have. If there's waste, fraud, or abuse, as has been mentioned, let's find it, let's cut it out. Let's take a look at prevailing wage, some of the other things that impact the expenses that are there that we're all of a sudden looking for more money for. But at the end of the day, absolutely not.
Mr. Pugliese.
Yeah, I would agree that I don't think that we should be raising our fees or taxes at all right now. I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's a plenty of issues that we can look at within PennDOT for efficiencies and to save money. And like, a lot of us are in our own homes, we're living within our means, we're living within a budget, and we need to make sure the state government does the same. We talk about, for example, prevailing wage or other things like that. Prevailing wage hasn't been updated since like the 1960s. So there are things like that I think that we need to revisit, see how we can make government more efficient, and I think that's one way that we should do that.
Mr. Pugliese, the next question is yours. Do you favor privatizing the state-run wine and spirits stores? And if you do, how would you use any revenue generated from that effort?
Yes, I do support the privatization of the liquor stores. I think that I don't think that the state has any business being in the wine and liquor business, that industry at all. I think that we could be using that money for transportation dollars to taking care of our education, other things like that. I think that, as was said, we really aren't putting our money necessarily in the best places. I think we could put that money into our technical schools, our community colleges, really align our education with the opportunities and make sure that our students and our youth and really everyone has the education and the ability to compete in the global market so they can get that good family-sustaining job.
Other candidates on privatizing the wine and spirits stores, Mr. Regan.
Well, I agree that the state probably should not be in the liquor business, but it's a $7 billion business. So if we could get fair market value for our liquor control, I'd say sell it. But don't sell a $7 billion business for a $1 billion business. And the other part of that, for a $1 billion price tag, the other part of that is it's one of two money-generating agencies in state government, Liquor Control and the Turnpike Commission. And the other thing is, the way the current bill, the proposed bill is written, I mean, I think everyone has a misconception that as soon as this deal's done, 30 days later you'll be able to go into Sheetz and buy beer. That's not in that provision. It's not. It's selling licenses. There's no guarantee. So I think there's a misconception among the general public of how this is going to work out. But we have to be careful about that. I mean, this is a big cash cow for the state of Pennsylvania. Do we want to give it up? I say we do give it up and privatize it, but it has to be done the right way. We have to get fair market value, and then we have to get the right amount, the right application to our state, which I think what the people want is convenience. And if that doesn't happen, I don't know if we should do it.
And just quick clarification there, maybe you meant liquor or wine, but that bill as it stands would not do anything to change Pennsylvania's beer law, which you're right. A lot of people do have a misconception that that's what we're talking about. Another rebuttal from Mr. Sigg.
I do support the privatization of the liquor stores. The state has absolutely no business being in the liquor industry. And I would dedicate that funding that we raise for that to go towards bolstering our pension funds and towards transportation. As Mr. Regan said, we need to be sure to do it the right way, unlike we did with our gambling licenses and a lot of the leases for Marcellus Shale in the northern tier. We need to make sure those go to the highest bidder and not whoever is politically expedient at the time.
Other candidates. Mr. Johnson.
Absolutely. Let's privatize those liquor stores. I deal with that every day in my industry. We're licensed establishments. It's inefficient. You can never get what you're looking for. There's no competition whatsoever. Prices are basically fixed. And what is government doing in the business of business anyway? They spent thousands of dollars. If you remember a few years ago, they spent thousands to train their employees on how to give better service. That's your tax dollars. That's insanity. So absolutely, get them out of it, let competition, let free market reign, and we'll see a lot of selection, a lot of improvement. Obviously, more stores will open, better jobs will come through, offering opportunities for people who aren't employed now. There's an opportunity to get in. There you go. So absolutely, absolutely.
Other candidates? This is kind of fun. They're talking about some of the stories I did, so... Mr. Johnson, this last question is for you. 1 in 4, approximately, Pennsylvanians are currently receiving some sort of public assistance from the state's welfare agencies. The question is all welfare bad? And how will you approach this very large part of the state budget?
That's a loaded question. Is all welfare bad? Obviously, there needs to be a safety net. My goodness, those safety nets have turned into hammocks, haven't they, where people sit there forever and ride them on and on and on. So that's a problem. I've met with the secretary, and he came out to one of our Republican Club meetings, and he was talking about how in the next 10 to 15 years that the welfare portion of the expense in our state is going to move up so quickly, it's going to crowd out the things that are important to us, whether it's education, transportation, whatever it might be. Take your pick. It's going to crowd those out. Some of that is mandated increases. You've got the impact from the things on the federal level, Obamacare, et cetera. We've got to do something about it. So is all welfare bad? Absolutely not. But there is a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. I mean, there were dozens and dozens of stores that were actually kicked out of the program because of the way people were using food stamps, like a cash trade-out type thing. Again, wrong. We investigate that, we find it, we reduce the expenses that are there, and we have to do something to tackle the expenses that are coming about when it comes to the welfare programs that are in place. If we can give people an opportunity for jobs, again, make the whole state a keystone operating zone, the whole state, give people an opportunity to get off that and make a chance to have a good life for themselves, then we reduce that expense. But we have to change the culture. It's become a world where you just sit there, wait, and hope everything gets better and living off the taxpayer's dime. That's got to stop.
Mr. Pugliese.
I would agree. I think it's important for us as a society to have those safety nets for individuals, but at the end of the day, we need to make sure that those on public welfare are not taking advantage of the taxpayers who are putting money into that system. I think that we have an administration right now who truly is doing their best to find the fraud and waste. You had the General Assembly last year asked the Secretary of the Department of Public Welfare to try to find $1 billion of fraud and efficiencies. He went back to his staff and said, I think we can find $4 billion. And I support the Secretary of DPW and the administration, and I think that we do have the ability to find more efficiencies and reduce the fraud. But at the same time, I think that it's important for us as a society to have safety nets and take care of those who cannot take care of themselves.
Other candidates on public welfare benefits. Mr. Regan.
As I mentioned before, with my position with the Inspector General, I had a bird's eye view of the welfare system. And I agree, Governor Corbett has ratcheted up a notch. And I think Secretary Alexander is a good man. I think he really wants to do what's right. And they're making progress, but it is a huge problem. I think they're putting Band-Aids on it, and I think it really needs to be completely revamped. I think it needs to be modernized. I think the computer systems need to all interface. It doesn't take long for these people to figure out how to beat the system, and there's a lot of them beating the system right now at a rate that is just so alarming, and it's so expensive. Honestly, millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars going into a bottomless pit of our tax dollars. I think one of the things we need to do there is appoint a program integrity czar who oversees it. The Inspector General's office is not big enough to oversee it. I think we need to have a program integrity czar who oversees welfare fraud and tries to develop teams to go in and target it specifically where it exists. I think it'd be very important, be very efficient, but it's a mess. It really is a mess, and it's bleeding the taxpayers dry. It needs to be fixed. I'd like to lead that charge.
Other candidates. Mr. Durr.
I think that there's some challenges that we face with our welfare system, and again, we need to be compassionate, but there needs to be some accountability with that compassion. I believe that there needs to be a bill presented that will drug test welfare recipients.
I think that
Mr. Regan again.
I think that bill's been proposed, and I think that it's important. And I can tell you from my time as the U.S. Marshal, we have commonly found in places that we went in looking for bad guys, welfare, EBT cards, food stamps, things like that were being traded for drugs. So I think it's very important that we take that big step in making people who have had drug convictions be tested for drugs before receiving welfare. Very important.
Mr. Pugliese.
I just want to mention, I think that, as myself and others were developing the Commonwealth's Department of Public Welfare policy, we did appoint actually someone to try to look for the fraud and waste in the Department of Public Welfare. So I think that it's important that we actually ensure that we give them the resources to have the ability to go in and find that fraud, which I'm not sure they have enough resources to do that. So I think there are tons of efficiencies in fraud, but at the end of the day, I thought it'd be important to mention that as part of the policy that we, I helped write and develop, we did actually appoint someone to do just that.
A very brief lightning round on something much lighter to finish things out just before we get to closing statements. If you could briefly, maybe a minute or less apiece, if we could, to stay on time. We're going to end right at 9 o'clock. Each candidate, please tell us who your hero is and why. Mr. Durer, 1 minute.
Yeah, I'd have to say my hero is probably my grandfather. My grandfather was a good Irish man. He was stubborn. He was set in his ways, but he had the courage of his convictions. And I was always proud of my grandfather. And he was unfortunately, I found the light. He was a blue-collar Democrat. And I found my way to the right party, I should say. So, but he was my hero because he was true to himself. He was true to his family. And I think that too many times decisions that are made at the political level, we don't think about the way that they impact ourselves and our families.
Mr. Sig, your hero.
Without a doubt, it'd have to be my father. He's a businessman. He owns a real estate company up in Center County. In the last 20 years, they've been hit extremely hard by the recession in the early 90s, and then the recession that we're still struggling to come out of today. And both times he's managed to rebuild the company starting from the ground up and keep it going. He's showed me what hard work and dedication can do in life, and I absolutely aspire to be half the man that my father is.
Mr. Regan.
I would say it was my father-in-law, Frank Uhas. Frank was a Vietnam vet and a career postman who has lymphoma. And to see what he's been through over the last 5 years with this disease, and to keep a positive attitude, and even when he's at his sickest, play with my kids, it boggles my mind, amazes me. So I think I respect and admire him more than anybody. Thank you.
Mr. Pugliese, your hero.
Yeah, I would say I have a tremendous amount of respect for my father as well. I think at the end of the day, he was a business owner, but he always managed to, coach my baseball team. He was at every single sporting event I ever played in. I'm not sure how he ever found the time, but he always showed time and time again that he had his priorities right. Family is first, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for that.
Mr. Johnson.
Well, I can say that when staring at my dad who's here. It's definitely my dad. He's always focused on the family for, when he first started out, before there even was a family, working in a shoe factory and doing what needed to be done. And when that factory closed, joined the military. One of the oldest guys to do that, when the cutoff was around 29 or 30. Gave us an opportunity to travel, see the world, something not everybody gets to do. Parents went through a pretty tough divorce, and the guy picked up 2 jobs, left the Army, and had to go back to minimum wage an hour to make sure his 2 children, me and my sister, could make do and get by. And that sends just ripples of pride through me about how I want to grow up and lead, and just everything that I ever want to do for my daughters is led off of the direction that he instilled in me growing up as a child. So, my dad.
Thank you, candidates. Each of you now has 3 minutes to offer a closing statement. Mr. Durer, would you begin?
I'd like to say thank you to everyone for being here. I'd like to thank the other candidates. You know, at the end of the day, we are all on the same team here. I think that's extremely important to remember. There are some differences between us. I think as you take a look at all of the candidates up here, you know, it's important to recognize that we all have different accomplishments. You know, as I sit before you, I'm a Marine. I'm a Marine veteran. And I'm actually the only candidate up here who volunteered to defend your freedom. I'm a small business owner. I am the only small business owner that sits up here. I face the struggles every day of having to go out and earn a dollar to spend it. It's more than just managing a budget. Managing a budget when you have it in front of you isn't too hard. When you have to earn a dollar to manage that budget, we know what that's like. You sit at your tables every day and you do it. Too many times decisions are made at a bureaucratic and state level where they don't think those dollars belong to you. I think that those are truly some clear differences. And as a financial planner, I truly have an ethical obligation to my clients to tell them the truth when I sit down with them, good or bad. It makes no difference. I have to be clear with them. And as a lawmaker or as a potential lawmaker, what happens is we have too many times people who just don't tell you the truth. They tell you what you want to hear. They tell you what's politically expedient. I promise you I won't do that. I want to promise you that I will treat every single one of your dollars like it's your dollar. It's not mine, just like my clients' money. I manage their money for them, and I want to make sure that that's clear. I think that you're going to have to take a look at the candidates that are up here, and you're going to have to decide who has the skills, but also who has the maturity to do this job as well. I think that what's interesting is a couple of the candidates said that they had high respect for their fathers. They were business owners. It's tough being a business owner. It's tough meeting a payroll. Those are all challenging things. But those jobs have to be done, and they have to be done at the state level, and we have to have respect for our taxpayers and their dollars. Thank you very much for being here.
Mr. Sig.
I just want to thank everyone again for coming here tonight. It's nights like this that our democracy is all about. I have the experience working to save our tax dollars. That's what I've dedicated my career to so far, and I look forward to continuing to protect our tax dollars in the House of Representatives. I am a true conservative. I hold my conservative values close to my heart. I will fight to protect those values. I will fight for the people in the 92nd District like I'm fighting for my own family. Thank you, and have a good night.
Mr. Regan.
I would dispute Mr. Durr's assertion that he's the only one who served his country. I served as a U.S. Marshal for 23 years, and I think that I did a lot to protect your freedom as well. But as you probably noticed, I am the elder statesman up here, and you know, it's not really something I like to brag about, but in this case I will. I think it's important that you have somebody in this office who has been around the proverbial block. And I think both in my personal life and in my professional life, I've done that. You know, as a professional, as a head of a large law enforcement agency, I had to balance $1 million budgets. I had to make life and death decisions. I had to send young men into harm's way. And on my personal side, I'm dealing with a lot of things that many of you are dealing with, and that is the cost of high cost of college education and how to save for it. You know, trying to deal with the issues, the kids, trying to make tough decisions about, you know, can we afford braces for our one child and still take a vacation? So I'm someone who has that experience, and I think it's important when you have constituents who want you to be able to communicate with you, and you want to talk about real-world experiences that I can share with them. It's not going to be theory with me. It's going to be someone who has experience and been around the block. And I will work, again, as I mentioned before, I'm a public servant. I've been a public servant. I made a decision as a young guy that I was not going to be happy unless I could serve the public. And if I'm elected, I will serve you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Pugliese.
I also want to thank everybody for coming out. It really is good. I think it's good for our democracy to see so many of you out here tonight. And I do want to thank all of the candidates up here. It's not easy putting yourself here in the public light, really putting yourself out there for scrutiny. So I think that I have a lot of respect for everyone up here. I do think at the end of the day, actions do speak louder than words. I think that the fact that I helped actually write and develop Governor Corbett's economic development, energy, environment, education, public welfare, transportation, veteran affairs, agriculture, and sportsman policies, I have a lot of knowledge and insight on really what the issues are. I'm not one person who says I just have an expertise in one area. So as your state legislator, you want somebody who knows and knows what to address on all the issues. And I think that I'm really the only one up here who actually can say that. With that being said, I think that I have helped manage over a $100 million budget. I have cut the state spending. I helped reduce our state budget by over 35%. I helped find the WAMs that we were talking up here, the wasteful spending, cut them out of the state budget, over $48 million now that the taxpayers won't have to spend. We went in there, we found 127 programs in the department, and we decide what is actually the most necessary, what is actually having the best bang for the buck for the taxpayers, and we cut that 127 down to 56. So I think at the end of the day, the economy really is going to be the number one issue in this race. As the legislative director for business and economic development, if you were a senator or a representative and you had a business question, it was my office. I was the one that you would have called. And as someone had said, whoever's going to be elected is not going to be king. You have to work with 253 other people and a governor. And I am the only one here who actually has the credibility with the entire General Assembly that can go and say, listen, this is important for business. This will bring jobs. And because I was the governor's director of legislative affairs for business and economic development, because if you were a senator or representative, you would have called me for advice on these issues, I can go in there on day one and be effective. I don't need the on-the-job training that we see President Obama doing. He had no experience, and I think that we're seeing the repercussions for that. So if you want somebody who doesn't need the on-the-job training, has the credibility to get things done and be effective on day one, I ask for your support on April 24th.
Closing comments, Mr. Johnson.
Thanks. Well, thanks again for coming. Like everyone else said, it was glad to see you and hopefully meet you a little bit. If you can stay a little bit longer, we'll chat with you. We talked about a number of things this evening. Hopefully we're able to use this to help make up your mind on choosing the candidate that's right for you. I imagine this is a big job interview, and here are the applicants, and you're the employer. I'm the guy that wants to eliminate taxes, not just reduce them. I'm the guy that wants to impose term limits on myself without legislation. I offer specific solutions on how to fix some of our problems, including House Bill 1776. If you want to create jobs, it's probably best to hire somebody that's created hundreds of them, both in the private sector and hopefully in the future, and making sure that we have an opportunity to do that statewide. If you want to deal with burdens on business, I deal with the rules, taxes, regulations that impose on business as a business operator. Don't own the facility, however, I have to manage it or else I'm out of a job, so I got to do a pretty good job at that. If you want to deal with budget issues and spending, well, my goodness, you need to have somebody that's dealt with budgets in places that are failing, not just a budget that operates to survive. It's got to be something where you can take a look at a facility that is failing, about to close its doors, lose all of its jobs, and if you can find a way to fix that, I'm pretty sure you can apply some of those skills into state government. So if you feel as I do that Pennsylvania has got more problems than it should, and if you want somebody to turn it around, then I would offer my own experience and results in the past to try to do that. Whether it's creating jobs, eliminating taxes, eliminating mandates, reducing spending, whatever it might be. And so from that standpoint, I would ask for your support on the 24th. Thank you.
Candidates, thank you very much. What do you say? Same time, new questions tomorrow right here? What do you,
Deal.
Everybody ready? You'll be back, right? Thank you. You've been a great crowd, and thanks for having me here as a moderator tonight.